On this second Sunday of the Easter season, we hear the story that we often hear on this day, what's usually called the story of doubting Thomas. But I'm not going to talk about Thomas today, or even about faith or doubt or resurrection. I'm going to talk about the moment in which the disciples find themselves. And that the moment is weird. This story takes place on 2 days, the day of the resurrection, and then 1 week later. So this is just after Jesus entered Jerusalem and was arrested and crucified and then raised, and now he appears to them. Everything has changed from 1 week before. There is no normal for the disciples to go back to. Jesus isn't around to follow anymore, at least not in the same way. They have to reinvent their work and their ministry. They have to reimagine what it means to be a disciple going forward without Jesus. Where do they go? What do they do? How do they organize? And what even is this movement anymore, anyway, without its leader? They are in a transition time, a transition from following Jesus in the flesh to continuing his ministry with his risen spirit. They are in an in-between time, a time of questions and doubts. And this time, it's weird. It's weird. Reverend Dr. Sarah Drummond, my friend and former divinity school classmate, and also the founding dean at Andover Newton Seminary, wrote a blog post a week ago about transitions. She wrote, "Transitions make people weird." And she argues we're all in one giant transition right now. She says, transition weirdness is a worldwide fog in which we're all trying to orient ourselves. We are starting to come out of the COVID pandemic, but we aren't there yet. For more than a year, we have adjusted our habits, changed our work patterns, isolated ourselves where we could, and stressed ourselves sick where we couldn't. We have lost loved ones, weathered a contentious election, and experienced a society-wide reawakening to the prevalence of racism. Now we're trying to figure out the nature of normal because soon we're supposed to get back to it, but we don't know how. If transitions generally cause people to forget themselves, behave in ways that are out of character, and make bad choices, we all need to be on high alert during this season because transition is the water in which we're swimming. Whereas we can usually trust our instincts during this time, it's more important that we check them because transitions make people weird. The best we can do is watch our own choices especially closely, trusting that the weirdness is affecting us, and then treat others with tenderness and affection, knowing that it's affecting them too. That was a lot, but I think it's so good. The crux of which is we're all in a transition and it's making us weird. Just like the disciples living between the resurrection and whatever would come next, we too are in an in-between time. We're living between the sort of maybe ending of the pandemic and whatever comes next. And it's weird because we are vaccinated and we are not vaccinated. We are feeling confident and bulletproof, and we are feeling cautious and nervous. Deaths are falling, but cases are rising. The Johns Hopkins University COVID tracker designates Essex County as still being very high risk, stating that indoor activities are very dangerous right now and should be avoided, and to avoid events with more than a handful of people, including worship. Hospitalizations in Essex County are up 33% and cases up 15% in the last 2 weeks. And yet, restaurants are full, kids are back to school full time, people are traveling on airplanes, going back to the office, and 25% of the county is fully vaccinated. What do we do with all that? How do we hold all of that? We're in a transition and it's weird. We're supposed to get back to normal soon, but as Reverend Drummond notes, we don't know how to get there or even what that is anymore. On Wednesday, a New York Times article wondered, what is normal life? Saying, for now, the in-between feeling persists, the feeling of being on the verge of something, but not quite there yet. It's an in-between time, a weird transition time for everyone, but also for us as a church. It's a time between pandemic church life and whatever version of normal church is to come next. But we don't even know what that normal will be or exactly how to get there. How are we to be the church now? What have we learned this past year? What has become most important to us, either because of its subtraction or because of its addition? And how are we to be the church in this moment when we are in very different places? Some of us are vaccinated and ready to go. And some of us, like all of our kids, won't be vaccinated for a while. Some of us are eager to get worship back in our sanctuary. And some of us are not ready for in-person worship, and some of us can't even get there if we wanted to. Some of us can't stand worship on Zoom, and you're probably not here right now. And some of us love worship on Zoom. Some of us have found depth and connection and meaning in Zoom small group meetings, and some of us don't like it at all and don't want to be on a screen another second. Some of us feel that the connections of our community are fraying and in jeopardy, and some of us have found even greater connection and belonging in this time. Some of us are worried that we will never get back to the sanctuary. And some of us are worried that Zoom will be taken away. And some of us have simply disappeared and not engaged at all, deciding to wait until things are back to normal. I have heard all of this recently. All of these feelings and concerns I have heard. And I imagine that there are many more feelings and experiences in all the places in between. Now, not only have we experienced church so differently in the past year, but to complicate matters, we all respond differently to trauma, loss, and risk. So much of living through this pandemic has been moving through loss and managing risk. And we all do that in really different ways because of our past experiences, our personalities, and our life situations. One afternoon this fall, I stood in a school parking lot chatting with a neighbor as our kids participated in a program together. It was an outside activity with masks required at all times, and the kids could stay relatively far from one another. Not only that, but COVID cases were pretty low in September. So even I felt pretty comfortable with my daughter participating. And I have a pretty low tolerance for risk. As you know, I've had the additional complication of having 5 households connected via kids going back and forth. So everything we did directly affected 12 other people. So as I stood there chatting with my neighbor said to me, "Oh, but Julie's kids, they won't be coming. They decided not to do it this year because of COVID." "Really?" I said, incredulous. They didn't want to do this outdoor, masked, distanced activity? Jeepers. I could hear the judgment in my voice, perhaps because I felt relieved to know that there was someone even more cautious than me. Then my neighbor turned to me. "Julie's husband died of cancer last year. You didn't know that?" She said she just can't take any more risk after that loss, so they are not doing much this year. My stomach dropped. I didn't know about her loss, and I was embarrassed at my gleeful judgment of her choices. Meanwhile, a member of my extended family has continued going to the gym throughout the pandemic, even at the worst moments of the winter surge. One day I remarked to my partner, Jason, "Is she insane going to the gym right now? That's so dangerous. She's not coming to our house, I'll tell you that right now." I could hear the judgment in my voice. And Jason responded, "She was in tears the other day. She felt so isolated and lonely. You didn't know that? Going to the gym is sort of all she has right now. So she's decided to keep going so she doesn't lose her mind." My stomach dropped. I didn't know the depth of her isolation, and I was embarrassed at my gleeful judgment. We do not know what each one of us is holding, from deep grief to isolation to past trauma and loss. But those things shape our responses, our choices, and our needs in this moment. So in this weird time, this transition time, we just need to have compassion for one another, to treat each other with tenderness and acceptance, to honor our varied experience, and to listen to one another without judgment. And as the body of Christ, we seek to hold all these many needs and hopes and fears and desires. A tall order, yes. But we have done hard things before. And I do believe West Parish Church is uniquely and wonderfully gifted at caring for each other and welcoming each person as they are and where they are. I believe that is one of our greatest strengths. And apparently, you all do too. Based on the Thriving Congregations survey that some of you took a few months ago, the survey indicated that we do best at welcoming, including, and belonging. And we think it's the most important thing that our church is accessible and open to every person, no matter who they are or where they are coming from. So we're in a weird time. What will our life look like going forward? How are we to be the church now? When will we be back in the sanctuary, and how will we do that? What about music? communion, Sunday school, small groups, coffee hour. Honestly, we don't know for sure. Like every church, we are figuring this out as we go, figuring it out for the very first time. Which is why we haven't said very much about where we might be heading. And I am sorry for that, because I know it's caused some anxiety. We haven't made proclamations about our future in large part because it is so hard to make any plan. What will things look like next month, in the summer, in the fall? We're now able to make much better guesses, of course, with vaccines rolling out, but our plans are still in process and must be held lightly because, as we know, things can change. But here's what we are hoping to do. Hoping, underline in bold, hoping to do, starting in May in 3 weeks. We hope to offer 2 services most Sundays, one in person outside and one on Zoom. Now, is it awesome to be splitting ourselves into 2 groups? No, it stinks. But this is a weird in-between time. And offering 2 services, both done well and fully connected, is a way to offer everyone a good experience, no matter where we are. We'll see how these 2 services go. Maybe we'll do that for May and June and July. Meanwhile, we have formed a tech team that will be working on getting us set up to have hybrid worship. You may have heard that term, hybrid worship, which just means worship that is both in person and online at the same time. Sort of like when we were outdoors in the fall and we Zoomed the service, except much better and more integrated. What we hope to do is this, to return to the sanctuary. We're aiming for the fall. Yes, we are going to get back to the sanctuary, folks. And we will Zoom that in-person service out to those of you at home, and those of you on Zoom will be able to be seen and heard. So imagine, however many of us are allowed by guidelines to be in the sanctuary, we're guessing that'll be 35 or 40. We're there sitting in the pews, Dimitri's at the organ, and off to the side is a big monitor where we can see those of us who are at home. And because we can see and hear the folks on Zoom, someone unable to get to the sanctuary could even be the lay leader. Why not? That is my dream anyway. Why? Because then we leave no one behind. Then we'll have our in-person sanctuary worship in our sacred space with our pulpit and our pews and our windows and our organ. And those of us not yet ready to be in person, or those of us who live in other states, or those of us who have difficulty physically getting to church, or those of us who are traveling, can still participate in worship. And people wanting to visit West Parish can do so easily from their homes and then join us in person when they are ready. I am reading that this will be an important aspect of church outreach and welcome. People will church shop a virtual service first. So everything that I am seeing and reading and hearing about the future of the church is that offering some sort of virtual church is just a given for going forward. And every church is wrestling with how to do this and its implications and what it means for being the body of Christ together. Last month, I attended a webinar on hybrid church with Reverend Jim Keat, who says, after a year of splashing around in the deep end of online church, many congregations are looking towards the day when they can once again gather safely in person. As we return from these online spaces to our in-person gatherings, what will we take with us? What will we leave behind? How will we integrate what we have learned and experienced into the future of what it means to be church? It's a weird time, and we are all affected by that weirdness, including myself, folks. I am completely weird right now. But I am truly excited to be asking these questions with all of you, and truly excited to continue to grow and learn to be the church in new ways. Out of this devastation and crisis is coming something new and exciting for us, right? And this is how we as a church stay alive and vital and relevant and accessible. Finally, and this is my final point, I swear, I have heard fear and frustration from some of you recently. Fear that Zoom is going to end. Fear and frustration and worry that we'll never get back into the sanctuary. And while I don't want anyone to feel fear or worry, I think we're all just going to feel a little of that for a while because we are in an uncertain, weird transition time. But I want to say that I think these fears and frustrations about our future together are actually wonderful. They are wonderful because all of the concerns and the fears that I've heard about how we'll worship and where and when and how is it going to work, they all stem from a deep love for our life together, a deep valuing of our worship and our connections. Otherwise, you wouldn't care. So I think it is great that people are deeply concerned about what's going to happen. Being a faith community in whatever form it takes is so important to us, that we are feeling its loss or anticipating its loss so deeply. And that's amazing in this time of falling church attendance and declining religious affiliation, that we should so desperately want to worship together and stay together. Wow, what a fabulous problem to have. Truly, the people at West Parish care too much about what's going to happen. What we are doing here, trying to be the people of God, it really matters. And it really matters to all of us. So maybe exactly how we will do that is uncertain. And maybe exactly how each one of us wish it would look is different. And maybe exactly what the church is changing. It's adapting to post-pandemic life, just like every organization. But the core of our life will always remain following Jesus, seeking God, and caring for one another. And we will continue to do that even in this weird time and after the weirdness. So let us trust that God will continue to lead us and keep us together.